Let's get started. This is the standard statement the organizers ask us to show. Please pay attention to it carefully. But what we really want you to pay attention to is what we're going to be talking about. We are going to be describing what is a CDP, why you want it, why it's good for you. But more importantly, we're going to be focusing on the privacy, security, governance aspects of the CDP. So to get started, I am Manish. I've been working for several years in the field of information security, big data, and right now I'm the field CTO at Skyflow. And I'm going to hand it over to Sumanta to take us through the first part of the conversation.
Hey everybody, I am in Walmart. I am a director in the identity and privacy side, and I've had previous roles mostly in the ad tech and privacy. And with that, I'll jump into our agenda for today. We're going to talk about the customer data platform and management of data with the privacy challenges for the next 15 minutes. We're going to talk about a little bit of the data creation and how it's happening at an unprecedented scale. And then we're going to talk about what are the DMPs and CDPs of the world, and then some challenges and how the privacy vault solves some of the privacy challenges. All right, let's jump into the data. I'm sure the folks here have quite a bit of idea of the scale of generation of data today. Let's talk about this in a little structured way. We have 8 billion people in the world today. 70% of them, those users are online, and 30% of those users are going to internet every day. So that's 1.5 billion or 1.7 billion daily active users on internet. And there was a joke at a point in time that we will count record at bytes and megabytes and gigabytes and terabytes. Now we speak about millions of terabytes of data that gets created on an everyday basis. And if you think about the identities, there are like 70 digital identities per person online for every human being, for those who are online. So imagine in this way, me, who has an identity when I go to my social, will have a different identity when I go and purchase something, versus I see an ad in a publisher website. And now marry those to the 30% of the world's population who are offline. There is no scalable way to know their identity today. There's no way to map them back to the online presences. And imagine a user who goes to a shopping market and they transact with cash. There's no identity. We can't trace their records back to a digital persona in a very scalable way. So this is the real data generation that's happening today. Now, how are the companies really tackling this? So back in the days, we used to talk about databases and data warehouses, and then came the word data lake. And then we started talking about CDPs and DMPs. I would love to put a framework around what are these CDPs and DMPs of the world. Essentially, all we're talking about is a set of softwares that helps ingest the data, that collects, stores, manages, and then sends it to the activation channel. That's the set of software which is CDPs and DMPs. Now, there are some nuances between the two. CDPs are typically used by retail, pharmaceutical, financial services, medical, and so on and so forth. It's essentially a wrapper on a lake. And then, depending on the intelligence that's needed for the activation channel, these CDPs are pushing those data into the marketing segment or into the personalization segment. But in the case of DMPs, it's slightly different. It's same data management platform, but for ads. So in the world of ad tech, the key role that DMPs play is they join the demand side and the supply side, the advertisers and the publishers. It is slightly different from the CDPs, but essentially they do the same thing. Manage the data, build the intelligence, send it to activation. Now, if we go back to DMPs for a moment, the reason I want to stress on this is CDPs solve a type of problem for a type of customers. DMPs solve a type of problem for another sets of customers. And in the case of DMPs, it's very ads. It's very much about activation, lookalike audience building, behavioral targeting, and so on. Let's talk about a little bit of a framework of DMPs and CDPs. It's super dumbed down version of how CDPs look like. It's so much more complex than this. But at the end of the day, these components don't change. They're the same. At the super left-hand side, when you see, you have a whole bunch of input sources. We have devices, cross-OS, cross-model. Then you have real-time platform, batch platform. Then you have interaction data, transactions data, clickstream data. All of this is coming. Then you have DMP logs. Then you have CRM information. All of these are coming in an unstructured format based on the department, based on how those systems are built. If you look at the middle segment here, right in the middle, once the data is coming, it's passing through the ingestion channel. It's hitting the raw layer right in the middle. And then while it goes to the raw layer, it goes through a cleansing process. Identity gets matched, resolved, and then enriched. And when all of this happens, they go into a catalog table. What exactly is catalog table? It's nothing but the same data stored in a way that's usable, depending on the business need. And all this while, there is a layer at the very bottom in the middle that you see, which is governance and the privacy layer, which is what we will focus on in the later slides. Now, when the data has been massaged, processed, and made for use, they go to the activation side, which is the right-hand side here. The activation could be broadly two buckets. One, around monetization, marketing, ads, subscription business, and so on. And one, around user profile creation, which is modeling, analytics, and etc. So this is a standard DSP, a DMP, and a CDP architecture. Now, let's talk about some challenges. There are lots of challenges, but all of these can be broken down into a couple of key clusters. And we'll talk about one area in particular later. Let's talk about the challenge when the data comes in. There are so many departments in an organization when the data gets collected. So there is departmental data silos. These data sets are coming in many different formats, which is not rationalized. So there's a significant amount of data professionals going just making the data readable. And then we build the unified view of the customer, which is missing at this point. And I won't even go into the inaccuracy and duplication of the data. So we have data that came in. We don't know how good that is. It hit the ingestion layer. It got processed. Let's talk about a little bit of privacy. Generally speaking, in the industry, for any kind of business or any kind of organization, we ask users, hey, we want to use your data. And the user says, yes, you can use this for these and these purposes. Now imagine at an application layer, the user is saying, you can use it for these purposes. Now it's moving to tens of systems, and that entire consent flow has to pass. And when the data has to be used, we have to respect that preference or the consent or the choice that the user made. Now that's where the complexity comes, because privacy seems like a single word. It's not a single word. There is a different gamut of privacy on data. Then there is consumer data. Then there is health data. Then there is data isolation and data sovereignty. And then there is transparency. All of these has different roles to play. In a sense, when we think about all kinds of data governance, compliance, and privacy in a setting of a lake, it's a humongous effort to manage the user data. Let's talk about the last leg of the challenge, and then we'll go into the vault piece. Let's say everything is perfect. The lake's beautiful, data has been managed, user preferences have flown. Is it really usable? Maybe, maybe not. So at that time, there are lots of complexities that come in. For example, each system that's doing the activation or doing the monetization, they have their own ways of reading the data and then pushing it to the customer. That's where the observability comes in and the integration cost comes in, which is a real setting, real life challenge. And then oftentimes these customers or internal teams who are really monetizing, they say, hey, I got your data from the lake, great. Can I actually marry this with this 3P data I'm buying or this 2P data that I'm getting? It's an extremely complex challenge to marry a lake's data that's internal with other data sources that purchased or procured or shared. So that's where the data usage challenge comes in. And then I won't go into the accessibility, that's obvious. I want to talk about one last point before handing over to Manish. Now in all this while, it's all about online users. What about the 30%, the 3 billion users who are offline? They are a part of the business and we do address them. So getting that omni view of the customer is probably the North Star of a data lake, and for any business that evolves around data lake. So let's just think about these challenges and we'll focus on some parts of it. And I'll hand over to Manish, and Manish will speak about the privacy and the vault.
Thank you very much, Sumanta, for walking us through the challenges, the size and scale of the data we are talking about, the patterns of DMP and CDP that you can use to make sense of this, and more importantly, the challenges. Now, as you can see, and as Sumanta mentioned, there are a lot of challenges you have to deal with, the scale, performance, etc. We're going to keep all of that in mind. Those are important. But what we are going to focus on is actually a subset of those challenges. We're going to assume for now that you have somehow captured the correct user consent. We're going to make sure that it's enforced through your entire system, because of course, if you just capture the consent but don't do anything with it, what's the point? We're going to make sure that you can take all this valuable data that you've captured and protect it. And we're going to talk about compliance, all the compliance obligations that you have, regulatory, contractual, etc., and look at how you can solve those problems. Now, of course, you could take each of these problems individually and solve them on a point-by-point basis wherever they show up in your architecture and your systems. You could do that, but that's probably not the best idea. A better approach to take would be to think of an architectural approach to a solution that can solve all of these for you without you having to take on most of the burden across the wide variety of systems that you have. Basically, specialization. Have something specialized on the security compliance aspects and you specialize on the other aspects, the other challenges that CDPs bring up. So, if you take a look at the challenges that we are highlighting out here, these aren't really specific to CDP. However you chose to architect your data systems, you would have to deal with regulatory, you would have to deal with data security, you'd have to deal with making sure you are following users' consent preferences. So before we get into CDP specific stuff, let's take a step back. I'd like to talk about an architectural pattern that you can use to solve these problems all in one go, instead of trying to solve them one by one wherever they show up. To do that, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, we are going to try to do what is standard practice. And a few years ago, IEEE published this thing about a general pattern that can solve a whole bunch of problems, not just for CDP. So if you take a look at the picture on top, what happens is a traditional environment that does not use a data privacy vault. And as you can see, it's got front end, it's got middleware, it's got back end, it's got OLTP databases, OLAP databases, the whole kind of shebang all put in one simple image. And all data is treated equally. You are collecting sensitive information from the user, you're collecting non-sensitive information from the user, and you don't really distinguish those two. You basically send them through your systems, and all of them, you got logs, you got backups, you got reports, all of them could potentially have sensitive information, may not, even if they don't need it, you don't really know, and you got to basically solve the problem every single place. This is why solving it in a point-by-point basis is not really the best idea. A better approach is to use the data privacy vault pattern, which is at some point in time, now IEEE for their example chose the front end, but it's kind of doesn't matter. This is a flexible pattern. At some point in time in your architecture, you take the data, split out the sensitive and the non-sensitive part. Take the sensitive data, move it into the data privacy vault, keep the non-sensitive data flowing through the rest of your systems. The reason you can get away doing this is the bulk of your data is actually not PII, it's not sensitive. You've got a whole bunch of business data, very valuable data, that you are mostly dealing with. PII data is essential, you can't get rid of it, obviously. It is valuable, but not for most of your systems. It doesn't need to be in your log. Your API gateway load balancer does not need to see the private fields, right? So you can get away with this kind of an architecture where the data privacy vault takes your isolated PII, protects it for you, and gives you access to it in an access control use case based manner. So that's a pattern. Now let's go back to the CDP and talk about how this applies to the CDP. So this is the diagram the logical architecture that Sumanta showed you, right? So what we're going to do in this diagram is we're going to basically see how a data vault fits in. On the left, you have your inputs, your data sources. On the right, you have your use cases or your users. You want these guys to not have to bother about the data vault. The middle is the CDP or your DMP. Now, that's the only place where you should have to worry about it. And even that's a fairly complex system. You don't want to have to worry about security, privacy all over the place. So the way you solve that is by adding a data privacy vault in your governance layer. So when your data is ingested, kind of like we showed in the previous diagram from IEEE, you take your sensitive data, you isolate it out into the data privacy vault, which protects it for you. And when the data is needed, for the use cases that you need it, you can basically rehydrate the sensitive data back into your data stream, right? So the bulk of your CDP systems don't have to worry about protection and governance of the data. And since the vault is what provides access at the end of the day, you can make sure that based on the use case, you show the data or not. This is the infrastructure view. I'm going to show the same thing again from a data-centric view. So what's happening from a data perspective is I'm only showing the sensitive fields here, but you can get the rest of the fields don't really matter here, right? The sensitive fields, they are going in the clear to your CDP as part of all the other streams that you're collecting. The CDP does not actually store it that way, thanks to the vault. The CDP is now storing some pointers to the sensitive data. These pointers are you could be calling them tokens, or let's just call them arbitrary pointers in this case. The pointers are not kind of an encryption, so you don't have to do key management. They are not a hash, so you don't have to worry about like, is my hash still secure? Is this quantum safe? It's literally just a pointer into the vault. So you don't have to worry about making sure you run this by your security team or your crypto expert. The important part comes in when the data is accessed on the right. And that's kind of where I'm showing two use cases. And as you can kind of see, we say in the example use case I'm showing, the support use case, you want to know the name, you want to know just the last four of the social security number, not the full one, because you want to verify that you're talking to the right customer, but you don't want to expose the full social security number. Now, unlike in encryption-based solutions, it's not that you need to give the decryption key to the support system or the support personnel. You don't have to trust them to do the right thing. This is zero trust. So the vault basically knows your use case, and you say, I am the support person or I'm the support system, and I need to get access to the social security number, and your corporate policy determines that you only get the last four. So the vault enforces that that's all you get. So you're getting your policies enforced by the vault without you having to do the work of figuring out how to do that. You figure out the policies, we do the enforcement. In a different use case, you may get to see the exact same data with a different view. For instance, the marketing has no real need to see social security numbers at all. They don't see any of it. But they may want to see your email and your date of birth and month of birth, so they can maybe send you like a 20% off coupon, spam you, or whatever. Hopefully not spam you, but if you want to spam, you could spam. Last point, Sumanta mentioned a whole bunch of compliance regimes where you have to worry about data localization. So without a data vault, you may have to say, let's say you had a US-based CDP setup, and now your business decides to expand in Europe. You may think, well, because of GDPR, since we have sensitive data, what I need to do is I need to clone my CDP architecture in EU. And maybe you can do that if it's just two, but what happens if you now want to expand into China? What happens if you now want to expand into Brazil? And so on and so forth. The data vault pattern, if you've been following the architecture so far, gives you another option where you keep your globally central CDP exactly the way you had it designed. What gets replicated and what gets localized is just the sensitive data, and you decide in your business case what is sensitive. You decide what's sensitive and you move just that part into the vault. So that's what you duplicate. You don't duplicate your entire CDP, which gives you scalability when it comes to expanding your business operations into multiple geographies with different compliance regimes. So that was our talk. Thank you very much for coming. We have a booth. Skyflow sells data privacy vault as a service. So all the things I'm showing, to get the data privacy vault, we'll give it to you, we'll deploy it how you need it deployed, and you can go get a demo and see how this works. I quickly skimmed through a whole bunch of details. You can go check out our blog. We give you a lot more detail about what we're talking about, and of course you can come talk to us at a booth. Thank you very much for coming. I will now take questions if you have any.